Good evening. Thank you for joining us here tonight. We are so honored to be able to participate with you on this pathway to healing and restoration. We're honored to be a part of this healing process in the lives of people we're ministering to now, presently, with Apostolic Moral Purity, aka AMP, and also those in the future that we know that we will be coming in contact with. It is our passion to provide a safe space, a place of healing, a place of restoration in the lives of every participant. And as we always say, you're not alone. You're never alone. And so we are so thankful that God has brought us together. We like to say brought us to the kingdom for such a time as this. And so thank you for joining us here tonight, because it's no accident that you're here. And as you're going to find out here shortly. It's going to be a great evening together. Dr. Surstad, it's great to see you tonight. God bless you. And wanted to greet you. And also, if you want to go ahead and after you greet us, introduce our special guest here tonight.
Thank you. Good to be back here with all of you again. You're going to see that there's a seat missing here this evening. Brother Evan Miller, not able to be with us this evening. But we're thankful for all the work that he's doing and putting the blessing that he is to this family. Apostolic Moral Purity. It's our honor this evening, our guests, to have Tom and Lana Lyman, and they're from the Northwest. They're about the most Northwest that you can get in the contiguous United States, out of the great state of Washington. And attended church in Bellevue, live in a town called Auburn, have been there for many, many years, worked with in the construction trade. Tom has done that with his father, the late Steve Lyman, whom it was instrumental in my life, and I considered to be an older brother, which would make me a surrogate uncle to our guests this evening. So we're just going to tie in on that, but glad to have them. They've got quite a history, and really happy that they're joining us here this evening. So Tom and Lana, good to have you.
Thank you.
Good to be here.
So let's start off. There's a lot that we're going to try and cover here this evening. But let's start off with this question for you, Lana. We saw you a couple weeks ago. You're working very intensely with the wives and the paths for healing, or the hope for healing, I believe it is, and the betrayed trauma and all of those aspects that you're working with. Give us a little bit of history about you and Tom, how you met, how you came together.
Okay. We met in January of 2002. I was a senior at Jackson College of Ministries at the time and was traveling with the music group there. And we were singing in Conroe, Texas, at Lake Conroe's first youth conference. And Tom was visiting his sister, who is married to Michael Enzi, and they were putting on the conference in Conroe. So it's just one of those crazy weekends where we caught eyes and kind of avoided each other for, I think, the whole weekend, walked past each other and didn't speak. And then finally on the last night, our group was loading up on the bus to leave, and he caught me in the parking lot, and we had a 5-minute conversation that was something like, if I don't speak to you now, I'll never forgive myself, or something. So we exchanged phone numbers, and he called me the next week, and we got married a year later.
Wow. What was that line again?
I think it actually went I've been tripping over myself all week trying to come talk to you. And I knew if I didn't do it now, I would never get another opportunity. Something along those lines.
I'd kick myself the rest of my life if I didn't. They're very awkward. Yeah.
It worked.
It did.
Still got her 20 years later.
Yes. And we just celebrated our 20th wedding anniversary last month. So
So for anybody single who's watching us tonight, you just got a great lead in line there that you can use. So that's awesome. And it's great to have you, Thomas and Lana here tonight. And Thomas, I met you in Orlando General Conference last fall. So we're thrilled to have you with us, and you have quite a story, as both of you do. Why don't you share with us, share your story and how it affected your marriage and your family?
All right. Well, for me, it will be starting at an early age, but 5 years old, came into wonderful Apostolic church, and grew up in a church school setting. Actually lived in a trailer on the church property until I was 17. Moved out when I was 17, dove really hard into construction, really was a workaholic for quite a while, and dabbled with some things I shouldn't have during that time, marijuana and a little bit of alcohol, a few other things for about 4 years. But my biggest addiction was definitely work. And at about 22 years old, I approached my dad and I said, "Hey, can I move home?" And he said, "Sure, of course. I would love you to, of course, go back to church if you'd be open. Basically, I'd like you to do that. Not a requirement, but a hope that he had for me. My dad always loved me through all of it. And that was a lot of what brought me back, was his love. No matter what I was going through, he knew the life I was living. There's probably some things he wasn't proud of, but my dad really, at 22 years old, my entire life really has shown me the love of God. And so I said, well, that's actually the reason I want to move back home, is to get away from some of the environment that I was participating in, because it started to get into some meth and other very damaging things in that atmosphere. So 22 years old, I moved home, and just absolutely surrendered. God took the addictions away, cigarettes done, everything done. I mean, completely healed me. And, was living for God, working, but focused on I made a commitment at that point. Any trip I took, it would be to a church convention that year. Well, sure enough, because of the times, went up to Texas to see my sister, and that's how I met my wife. And I do believe God put us together 20 years ago, and every day ever since. But got married, on fire for God, youth leader for 5 years. Wife and I had a ministry together. She's always been music director, but for 5 years together, we were youth leaders. And I remember making a choice about 5 years into marriage and being a youth leader, that I couldn't do both, build my career and still fulfill the ministry like I felt I needed to. And so made a choice to stop doing ministry and focus really on my career, which I look back, and that was a mistake. I should have at least stayed part-time involved. But I did. I dove really heavy into construction, which led from one addiction to the next. And I've struggled for most of 10 years or so, off and on, with alcohol. And then this last few years was actually cocaine, and, living the life of a functional addict, but miserable. I still went to work, I still went to church, but it was miserable. I've been sober 15 months now. I went to rehab, and I thank God that rehab facility was one of the first tools that helped me gain sobriety and clarity. I've actually been twice, but ever since I got through rehab 15 months ago, I've been on a pursuit to dig into what's the root, what's the seed, what caused all of that. The biggest thing I brushed over there, of course, I was unfaithful to my wife a few times. during the addiction. And for sake of not going too long, it was ugly, miserable. The guilt and the shame that I had, being around a great community, a great church, great family that would say things like, "Oh, he's such a great father, he's such a great husband." When I had a total double life for many years, feeling like, as I would be in church, that I was the Achan, or the man in the sin in the camp. And it was enough to cause health issues. There was a lot of isolation. During the worst of my addiction was when my father died. And I guess in some ways that's what people thought was I was just grieving, leave him alone, he's just going through something. But it wasn't that. I was immersed with multiple drugs, multiple women, still paying the bills, still going to church some of the time. But yeah, I was not a good husband. I was not a good father. And only I knew it, because I could cover it up real good by saying I'm working late. And I did for quite a while. My wife trusted me. We had vows, we had commitments. She never needed to look at my phone. Why would she need to look at my phone? She's a good woman. She trusted me. And I took advantage of that, and I manipulated her. And it was a rabbit hole that was going to kill me. Drunk driving could have happened, should have happened, overdose. I got 3 precious kids that I saw and do see every day, of course. She homeschools our 3 kids. She pours her life into our family. She's a dedicated woman that reads the Bible every morning and has 1,000 books in this room that she reads, and pours her time into being a great mother, a great wife. And I took big time advantage of deceit and what I wanted. What I wanted to fill my emptiness, what I wanted to fill my happiness. And never thought of myself as selfish, but I was the most selfish person I know for a while. Buying cars, buying boats, buying whatever I wanted, and spiraling the whole time for years. And knowing the answer, knowing it was right there, but not being able to find my way out. I don't know. It was dark. It was lonely. Would go to my shop late at night, and drink, and next morning start right out with cocaine to get me going again, and just miserable, just absolutely on the edge of death every day, and hated myself. I couldn't even look myself in the mirror and make eye contact with myself. It's weird to think about it now that was me, or was it really me? Like, there's the real Tom and there's the addicted, full of self Tom that was in control for a while there. And so that was 5 years ago that I finally, she asked me if I was unfaithful, and finally I gave in and said yes, thinking for sure it's over. She's gone. And believe me, at that point, you don't care about the house or the money. You don't at all. You care about the kids and the wife and your life. And I thought it was over. I thought for sure, in this situation, there's no chance in a million she'd stay with me. But I finally was eating up so much with guilt and shame, and I was coughing up blood. It was miserable. I felt just sick all the time, and owning my own company and having to go to work and act like everything's fine. It was miserable. But I went ahead and told her. And first thing she said was, call the pastor. We did. We went to his house. And during that time, he said, get a hold of Daystar Ministries, right?
No, it was a little bit later.
A little bit
but we
shortly
did get some
after.
counseling
We got a
later.
little bit of brief counseling right away. That's right. It was real touch and go for a few months there. I didn't want it. I was still spiraling and on and off, still dealing with the drugs. And then we came in contact and really sat down with Daystar, Brother first dad. And I don't know, at that point, I started to see some hope that I could talk and I could be myself and he wasn't going to judge me. And that reminded me of my dad that didn't judge me, that just loved me. And hope I'm doing okay here, not bouncing around too much, but that was 5 years ago. I struggled after that with the alcohol and drugs, and then went to rehab 3 years ago. Was clean for a while, and then relapsed one more time. The amazing part of all this that I haven't talked on yet is what I've found out in the past few months because of apostolic moral purity, because of the counseling I've done and continue to do. The pornography was at the root of pretty much all of it. I never considered myself a porn addict. I don't miss work and lose track of time, but it's been something I never talked about. And now that I'm able to talk about it with others, I've gained a new strength that I've never had since I was 12 years old. And I'm 45 now. But in this weekly meeting that the men participate in, we work the steps, we go through books. I mean, it's amazing, but I'm not alone. I actually have men that I do a Zoom call and a text thread, and men that I can call directly throughout the week. And we're all going through different things, but similar. And so I do that on Mondays. I believe in it. I do the same thing on other nights of the week as far as alcohol and drugs, substance. You know, I do believe that I was an addict and I'm always vulnerable. I don't say, hi, I'm Tom, I'm an addict currently, but I'm Tom, I'm an addict. I'm in addiction recovery and I'm always vulnerable. And so what gives me the strength is having atmospheres, having environments like Apostolic Moral Purity, like Daystar Ministries, where I can just be myself and say, you know, hey, this week I'm good, or hey, no, I slipped up, or I messed up, or hey, you know what, like I need help right now. And whether it's anger, whether it's pornography, whether it's alcohol, no matter what it is, I'm surrounded by these networks of men in my life that are doing this. And it actually works. There's a saying we have, you know, what we talk out or what we don't talk out, we more than likely will act out. And so I find strength in that. Again, it's been a long journey. I hope that has helped. And I'll stop here for a minute so we can jump around. I'm not sure how all this works, but I do know that the tools I've mentioned have saved my marriage, saved my precious children and my relationship, my business. Things are going great. I have more peace and joy in my life now than I've ever had. And I finally know what an intimate relationship is with God. I mean, I talk to him about everything. I talk to the men in the group about everything. I talk to her about everything. And I hope I never slip again. But if I do, I'm going to talk right to her. I'm going to talk right to the group. And I feel safe in that atmosphere.
That's a great feeling.
It is.
It's a great feeling to feel safe and to have peace. It's a big deal. Appreciate you communicating all those things. So, Lana, were you able to pick up on the signs of what was transpiring during all this time? At what point were you able to do that? And then how did all of this, which I know there's a lot, but how did that impact you and the children, family?
Well, as far as the picking up on things, I probably knew about the alcohol before I knew about anything else. That's been a 10, plus year struggle off and on. And then it was a little over 10 years ago that I found out that it wasn't just an occasional drink here or there, that he was actually a full-blown alcoholic. And it was a big thing. And I'll never forget when he told me that, when I found that out. My response to him was, well, are you having an affair too? And he just got real defensive, like, no, why would you even say that? I would never do that. And I said, because that's the next thing, because it's a slippery slope. If you open the door to one thing, other things are going to follow. And I don't even know where that came from. I just remember finding out that he was drinking made me suddenly feel very insecure and nervous about that. And then the years went on, and it was just this kind of thing that was there. It was like the elephant in the room. I knew, again, the alcohol was present, not in the home, but that he would drink occasionally. But he was in such denial, we couldn't really have conversations. If we tried to talk about it, he would get angry, and it was just this whole thing. And then when his dad got sick, he went downhill really bad. And then when his dad passed, it was just very bad. And I still didn't suspect anything other than alcohol. I knew he was drinking a lot. And he kind of had the perfect cover because there was so much grief going on. I mean, we were all grieving, but I even spoke with grief counselors that would tell me, you need to just let him go and have time alone. Don't pressure him. If he needs to be away for the evening, let him do that, because he just needs to process and grieve. Not knowing the whole time that he's gone night after night after night. We thought grieving, and that's not what was going on. And so it was about 9 months after his dad passed where things just really came to a head over the period of a couple of short months. And again, I thought it was just the alcohol, and I suspected drugs, some sort of drug involved. And we had a confrontation about that, and he confessed to the drugs and the alcohol and started trying to make changes there. And I had hope for the first time ever, because I thought, okay, he finally confessed, so things were good. And over the course of a week, I just had this nagging feeling. And I had asked him, now, over the course of that 9 months when he would be out, I asked him multiple times if he was having an affair, and he always denied it. And like he said, I just have always trusted him. I never had reason not to, really, up until that point. And so I still just kind of had it in the back of my mind and was suspicious. And then finally, after a week, after the confession of the drugs and alcohol, I remember laying in bed one night because I just suspected. And I was trying to get up the nerve to ask him. And I remember praying one night, like, God, just if this isn't really what's going on, like, take this, I just have this feeling, just take it away. Give me peace, take it away, and I just need the truth. Whatever it is, I need the truth to come out. And the next day I just woke up feeling so heavy, just knowing that I had to ask this question. And so, like he said before, I did. He finally confessed. And, unfortunately, at that time, it was a 1.5 year long relationship that was still going on. So, of course, we were immediately thrown into trying to get help. For him, just knowing that I was willing to stay if we could work on things. But like he said, too, it was a very ugly process for a couple of months where, revelation came in small doses, and, one thing led to another, and then find out there was actually a previous affair a few years prior. And for me, that one was almost harder than the 1.5 year long relationship, because it was during a time that I thought was one of our best years as a family and of marriage. And so finding out that there was actually unfaithfulness during that time was really hard for me. But so that just kind of started us on the process and the journey of trying to find help and get healing. And for a year, it was just constant working on the marriage, working on recovery from the infidelity. And that was it. Like the drugs and alcohol and porn wasn't even something discussed at that point. It's like, and I even knew that had been something at some point in time, but it wasn't even on my mind to like talk about that part or to question that part. It was the actual adultery and the physical affair and all of that I was trying to process through. And then, like he said, and we did really great for that first year after we call it revelation. A lot of people say discovery. So after everything came out, it was just, we both were on this jointed path of healing and working on things, rebuilding trust, all of that. And then the drugs and alcohol, he relapsed with that. And like he said, and then he went into rehab for a month and then came back and was good for a bit and then relapsed again with that. And that was what almost broke us, actually, was the trying to get through the drugs and alcohol, because with the drugs and alcohol, there was a lot of emotional and verbal abuse that went on. And so it was quite the journey, quite the process. And, like you said, 15, 16 months ago, it was one of those do or die moments. It's either it's going to get right now or we have to do something different. And thank God it got right. And it's been amazing ever since. Still a journey, and definitely will probably always be a journey, but God's really just not just done a work. He's done such a quick work this time around, which has been, I think, what's amazed both of us the most. Because after 5 years ago, going through the other things, and I know what recovery looks like. I know what that journey looks like. And so for things to just have happened as fast as they have, but it's not being done halfway. It's like, it's more right than it's ever been. And the version of him that I see now, honestly, I can say 100% it's better than the version I met and the version that I married 20 years ago. He's a different person, completely different person. And it's a good thing. It's in a good way. And I thought he was the best thing ever 20 years ago. So to say he's even better now, that's definitely saying a lot. But God's definitely done a work. And as far as the impact on me and my family, we did a really good job. I did a really good job of protecting my children from what was going on. I know people always say, oh, your kids know, you think they don't know, but they know. But I prayed over those kids daily and just prayed a hedge of protection around them. And when we sat down with them a little over a year ago now, we decided to sit down and tell them about his struggles, tell them about the drug and the alcohol, addiction, which he was in recovery at the time. And a few months later, we disclosed to the children as well about the unfaithfulness. And they had no clue. They were completely surprised by it all. And I even asked, I'm like, surely you suspected that something, did you pick up on this? The nights that dad didn't come home, or the nights that they were like, no, Mom, really, we had no clue that this was going on. They knew that he was different at times. And, as children, they couldn't quite put their finger on why, but they were like, never did we think that's what was going on. Like, we had no clue. And I totally give all credit to God for that, because I believe that he answered my prayers in just protecting them during that. And since then, they just 100% supportive and on board with his journey, his recovery, everything we're doing to try to help other people. They are behind us. I don't feel like it's caused any kind of issues. The relationship with him is better than it's ever been. And as far as for myself, obviously I've learned a lot in the last 5 years, and, I'm definitely on a path that I never thought I would be on 20 years ago. I thought that I was called to do music, and that was my ministry, and that was all I was ever going to do forever. And now being in this position of helping people and trying to further my education to help even more, it's never anything I would have imagined, but I'm loving every minute of it, and I'm thankful for it. And I tell people, it sounds kind of crazy to say it, but if I would have 5 years ago been able to see everything that was going to transpire, I don't know if I would have wanted to go through all that and put in all that work. Now, I was willing to do all the work for the unfaithfulness, but I didn't know all the twists and the turns that our story was going to take after that. I didn't see the multiple relapses with the drugs and alcohol that were going to come. I didn't see all of the abuse that lay ahead. There was so many things I didn't anticipate. And I'm not sure I would have had the courage to keep going if I would have seen it before. But now being on this side of things, I can 100% say that I would do it all again to see where we're at now. Because I mean, I wish we could have gotten here a different way. That would have been nice, but we've learned so much. And like I said, he's a different person, but I'm a different person. I mean, I have grown so much in the last 5 years, and my walk with God is completely different than it was. The way I view other people is completely different. There's just so many things that I would not trade. If I could go back and do it all over again, I would do it again, seeing where we're at now.
So talk about some of the things like in the last 5 years, the path and bounce between the two of you in answering this question, but the path and the you took and the process of healing, what all that, you don't have to go into all the detail, but give us some of the highlights of the healing, the restoration. What are some of the things that you did?
So overall, we put in the work. And at first, for years, I didn't want to. I just wanted to get sober, and that was it. Move on, go back to work, go back to this, go back to that. But it's proven in any sort of recovery, from alcohol to pornography to adultery to anything, there is a certain amount of work. At one point along the way, it was dreadful, the beginning. I got to buy more books. I got to spend more. Where you put your money and your time is where your heart is. And when I started putting money into recovery and putting time into going to meetings by myself, when it wasn't comfortable, it wasn't. And when I made that sacrifice to go to those multiple meetings a week in different levels, different capacities that I was dealing with, trying to figure myself out, I went to celebrate recoveries at other local churches that were close to home. I didn't even know anybody. They were very helpful. I went to NA, I went to AA, I went to a ton of different variety, but that takes gas money. I mean, most of those meetings, by the time you drive there and back, is 2.5 hours away from, the comfort of your sofa, the comfort of your evening. And so it was a sacrifice, and we've continued to do that. I have, where I enjoy spending money on another book. I've read more in the last year than I have in my entire life put together. I'm constantly like, man, I got to read this book. I'll read a good book. I'll buy 10 copies. I mean, I got a buddy. I'm like, you need to read this one. God's at War, man. This book changed my life. It's just incredible. And so I've been fascinated by it, so it took it from putting in the work, being dreadful the first few months and breaking those habits, to I like this. And this is who I wanted. This is who I really am. This is who God created me to be. Wow, this is my purpose. And this is so I hope that makes sense, but definitely putting in the work. I'll let you talk about the marriage intensive. We put our work into that.
So yeah, for me, it was multiple things. I didn't have AMP. It wasn't there. I didn't have the support group yet. It would have been great if I would have. I think I would have gotten through things maybe faster. But number one, hands down, I always say my walk with God, and just making time there were a lot of days in the early months, especially, I could not pray. I just couldn't. I didn't have anything to say other than give me strength, give me wisdom. I think I prayed that every day, but I did not miss a day reading my Bible. And that was in the worst of times with him, in the early days and weeks of the betrayal trauma, and during the alcohol and drug addictions. I never missed a day. And I credit a lot of why I am where I am to that, because even if there were days that I just didn't feel like I had anything to say in prayer, God was still speaking to me. And he did that daily through his word. I mean, so many things. I would find hope and inspiration in every story I read. You know, I'm just seeing other people's lives unfold and thinking to myself, if God can do that for them, he can do it for me. If he has a purpose and a plan for their life and you had it all orchestrated, then he's got to do the same for me. And so I found a lot of hope and help with that. Like Tom mentioned, read a lot of books. I think within 24 hours of Revelation, I was ordering books about betrayal, about, you know, just reading a lot of other people's stories really helped me a lot. Hearing what they went through, how they got through it, their tips, that kind of stuff. I read so many books. I mean, in the last 5 years, I can't even count. I've read so many books about the topic at hand. So I've got a lot on just drugs and alcohol and what that does and how a family can get through that, to the betrayal side of things. So reading helped a lot. Journaling was another really big one for me. I read a statistic recently that talked about the success rate percentage of people who journal when they go through trauma or grief or anything like that, and how much, and I can't remember the exact numbers, but just how much greater the success rate is for those people getting through that than if they don't. And I didn't know that at the time. One of the first books I read talked about keeping a journal, and I'm like, okay, well then I got to keep a journal. And I did, and it helped so much. Then of course, talking to somebody who had been there, like I said, AMP wasn't available to me. However, my pastor's wife had the wisdom to, within the first 24 hours, put me in contact with a friend of hers who had recently been through something similar. And so within 24 hours, when I'm feeling out of my mind crazy, not knowing if what I'm feeling is normal or not normal, I was able to talk to another lady who could sit there and tell me everything you're feeling is normal. This is fine. And it was huge for me. And that's what the AMP groups do now, you know, is we give that same hope for the ladies that are going through similar things, to just be able to let them know that this is all normal and here's your path forward and here's how you can get through it. I know Tom's already mentioned counseling. Counseling was huge. We had some counselors in the early days that helped us for a while. Then we got linked up with Daystar and with you, Brother Surstad. And I have also several times told people that aside from God, Brother Surstad saved our marriage. That if it wasn't for Daystar, because there was, in the last 2 years, there were many times when everybody else in our life had given up on Tom. Everybody, friends, family, nobody thought that he was going to pull through and recover. And I had so many people telling me, you just need to leave him. You just need to leave him. You need to be done with it. How much more are you going to take? How much longer are you going to put up with this? And, you know, they didn't know that part of my story is that 10, 11 years ago, God gave me a promise in a church service specifically about him. And there was a scripture that came to mind, and I felt like God spoke to me and just told me that he's going to restore everything. And, you know, that was 10 years ago. And so I had no clue what all was coming in the future, but I held on to that promise over the last 5 years and refused to let that go. And even when everybody else was saying, you need to just walk away, I remember distinctly a conversation with Brother Surstad in a counseling session where he told me, you know, I know you're tired. I know that you want to give up, but if you could just hold out a little bit longer, just be patient for a little bit longer. There's still something there. There's still hope there. And honestly, at the time, that's not what I wanted to hear, because I was just at my end, it felt like. But just those words gave me encouragement to, okay, if he sees something there and I have this promise from God, I've got to keep pushing. I can't give up yet. And so I can't speak enough to counseling. And we tell people all the time now, everybody needs counseling, whether you're having a problem or not. You just need to have counseling, because you'll find problems you didn't know you had, and it'll help you so much. And so I'm very thankful for that. And then what he was talking about, the marriage intensive, So about 6 months into to the Revelation side of things, so this was 5 years ago, we attended a non-denominational weekend intensive specifically for adultery recovery. And so we sat in a room with 10 couples for 3 days, nonstop, 3 days, and heard from couples that had been there and had healed from the trauma. And that weekend was so huge for us because not just the tools that we were able to take away from it, but also just hearing other people's stories. And I remember specifically sitting there and thinking, oh, wow, I don't feel like my story is as bad as theirs. Like theirs has so much more to it, and everybody's story is unique. But it just puts so much into perspective, I think, for both of us. And I also remember sitting across the room from a couple who was much older, probably in their 70s. And as they told their story, the trauma had happened in their marriage over 30 years prior to that weekend. And they still hadn't processed and healed and recovered from it. And I remember looking at him and saying, that's why we're here, because I refuse. We are not going to be that couple that 30 years from now, we still have issues from this. Like, we can do this. We can get through this. And so that weekend was huge. Just very, very big in helping us get through things. Can I say something about the weekend?
Yeah, I will. So there was 2 couples that hosted it that had been through it and were the teachers, the hosts. The other 10 couples were in similar situations like we were, just to clarify on that. But yeah, a 3-day, just life-changing,
Well, and we left that weekend saying, because it was non-denominational, and we just said, imagine how impactful this would be if the Holy Ghost was behind it. And because it was life-changing for us. I mean, we took communion. There was a lot of things that just were so impactful. But we kept saying, if, we need this. Why don't we have something like this in our movement? Like, we need this in the apostolic movement. And
yeah,
now we're going to have one. So this August,
Yeah.
we will be co-hosting the first that I know of apostolic weekend intensive for couples that are dealing with betrayal. And so we're very excited. It was a burden that God placed on our hearts at that conference, actually, that weekend.
Right.
And we were still so fresh in our recovery. We knew it was going to be a long way down the road, but God just planted that seed there that one day you're going to do this and you're going to help other people like this. And so we're teaming up.
I think that didn't one of the staff members actually say that to you?
Yes, to Tom. Yeah.
Actually, yes. One of the main men came over and prayed with us at the end. He said, I just feel led to tell you that I see you being involved in hosting one of these in the future. And I felt it, I feel like I heard, but it was so like, well, maybe, 10 years down the road. But yes, they did mention that to us. They've been supportive in this. We've talked to them a little bit about it. They stopped doing it. I don't know if you mentioned, but a couple of years ago they retired. But August will be the first one, Heal Thy Marriage. And something I want to mention is anything in our life, whether it's our physical body, just use an analogy there, but if we're going to heal our body from, in my case, I gained too much weight. I stopped working out. I stopped eating right. It takes some work, some energy, again, some cost, some time. But when you truly, after you do a rehab, a reset button, come out of something and say, you know what? I don't have to be who I was last year. I don't have to be who I was yesterday. There is so much hope and healing, and God can do so much in a very short amount of time. But just like choices, we have choices every day to do whatever we want. It's a choice to say, I want to have a beautiful marriage. I want to be a wonderful father. And I'm going to invest a couple of days, or I'm going to invest a couple of dollars into learning more about myself. I don't think you ever get to a point you stop learning. And I tell some friends of mine very respectfully with a smile, I say, you know what, bro, you need rehab. Well, I don't drink. I don't do drugs. I'm like, you need rehab. The way you were just talking about your road rage, the way you were talking about your employer, bro, rehab was one of the best things I've ever done in my life. And it cost me 10 grand out of pocket. And it was but I was on the edge of my seat taking notes, man. I don't want to come back here. I want to get everything this time out of this. And so I look at that, and the world talks about, drink responsibly, you're fine. But, oh, you went to rehab. Oh, wow, you got an issue. And I've been working any conversation I can to break that stigma in our community of rehab's a wonderful tool that God gave us. There's doctors, there's counselors, there's people that can help, but you need to make the choice to take a couple days or take some habits that you have and change those habits and disciplines and say and if you change that 1% a day, by the end of a year, you're going, I'm not even the same person. Our marriage isn't even the same. I mean, it can be very beautiful.
Well, there's a saying that says that it's not time that heals things, it's what you do with that time. So I think a lot of people sit around and just wait for things to get better, but they're not willing to put in the work to make it happen. But when you go through this kind of stuff, betrayal, addictions of any kind, it takes work to recover. And, he may have been the one to have the addiction and to do all the things, but that doesn't mean that my responsibility is any less in having to put in work. I have had to put in a lot of work over the last 5 years, but in doing so, we can turn around and help other people. And there should be, if you're going to have pain, have a purpose for it, do something with it. Don't just sit and suffer and hope things get better. They're not going to get better without putting in the work, plugging into the right sources of help, and then turn around and use it. I think that's why God allows us to go through these things sometimes, because he wants us to be able to turn around and help other people.
And
So
there's
you're going to do that. Sorry, you're going to do that this August. What's the name of that again?
Heal Thy Marriage. And it will be in Portland, Oregon. And Dr. Surstad will be there too. So you definitely don't want to miss it.
So is there a website that people can go to get more information?
There is.
And the answer is yes. Give us a second.
And you probably have it.
I think it's healthymarriage.love.
That is correct. And registration will be posted soon for that. So you can get online and register. But there's information on there to contact us if you have any questions.
Yeah, I'd encourage everybody that would qualify. Actually, I think you're going to be covering not just physical adultery, but also emotional adultery, which could be pornography or living a life of fantasy. So it's definitely an intense weekend for healing of the marriage relationship. And I think likely the relationship with God also is impacted there. So, Tom, you've been involved in another ministry too that you've started. I know we don't have all the time in the world for you to go into all of it, but just give us the cliff notes. What else you're doing?
So 3 months into being sober, I was laying in bed one night and I started singing, which singing's not my department, that's hers. But I started singing, I got the joy, joy, joy down in my heart. And within about 5 minutes, God dropped this on me, was happy hour, joy hour. Money buys happiness, joy is free. Tom, you've always wanted joy. Tom, you've always wanted peace. You tried filling that tank with happiness, it didn't work. And so I brought the pool table from my garage that wasn't being used and the ping pong table down to my construction office and told friends and family, and 34 people showed up to our very first joy hour a year ago. By the fourth week, there was 158 people in the building. Everything from ping pong to pool to food, Italian sodas, basketball, Uno, chess, checkers, you name it. So we've been doing that every Wednesday for a year. Last week, the third location opened. So there's actually one in Michigan. The third one just opened in Hoquiam, and hopefully soon one in West Virginia. But we're hoping that people all over the world will get the burden for this type of ministry. It's basically addiction prevention and addiction recovery through connection. Of course, I started it just simply to have one more thing a week to keep myself sober and accountable. I mean, nobody wants to get sober and be bored and stare at a wall, and not that I'm a great pool player, but shooting pool means I get to talk to people while I'm shooting pool. Pretty simple. And so we've had over 4,000 people come through our office in downtown Auburn. We've had support of local council members, the mayor's been there, business owners. It's very family focused, family oriented.
Happy hour for the whole family.
Happy hour for the whole family. So I'll give people a card when I see them. We hand all these cards out with a contact, with a conversation. Hey, it's happy hour for the whole family. Hey, it's happy hour without the alcohol. Come by, check it out. If you don't like it, totally fine. It's easy to talk about. It's easy to open our doors and do that. Lost my train of thought there. Oh, the biggest thing that I've seen it help with, because not all those 4,000 people who come are struggling with alcohol or drugs, but they are all struggling with this thing right here, this addiction. And what's going on in our mental health, as the world's talking about a lot, is again isolation right here. So everything we do, to sum it up, is all about connection and love and joy and celebration of life, but it's about not being isolated. We saw what COVID did. We've seen what these do. And so it's breaking those addictions. Nobody's on phones. Nobody's playing video games. And it's been beautiful. So it's called Joy Hour. We have a nonprofit 501c3 set up called the Considerate Group. And we're looking for people across the country that would like to open one. We'll help support. Get a hold of us if you'd like to learn more about it.
And so how would they do that? You have contact information for that?
You can call me directly. Considerategroup.org is the website. Again, considerategroup.org. And of course, call directly. Love talking about it. It's been very healing for our community. And just continue to see how it unfolds. We did start some actual sit-down recovery classes just 2 weeks ago. Very excited about that. But we're using our office building a little more often in the community to offer other tools to allow people to feel safe and communicate what they're going through. And if we can't help, we know who can, that's God. But there's different tools in the community too that are where we point people towards.
Thank you for sharing here tonight, because you guys, this has been fantastic. And I really appreciate and respect your transparency. Tom, you were emotional earlier when you were sharing your story, and I know during that time, and Lana as well, both of you were connecting with people who are watching this tonight and even in the future. So that's, Paul says that we're comforted with the comfort wherein we can comfort others. And what you guys have been through and your road to recovery and healing and restoration is blessing other people. I think it's fantastic. Also, the marriage intensive you guys are doing in August, that's like awesome. Great. This has been fantastic. And normally I ask people to offer a message of hope, but you've been doing that quite well here for the last good bit. And so I would like to ask you if you could pray for those who are watching here tonight, but also if you could pray for those who will be watching this broadcast in the future as well. And just impart through your spirit while you're praying, we'd be honored to have you close us out in prayer.
We'd be happy to. Jesus, right now, I thank you for this time we've been able to share, God, what you've brought us through. I know in your word, it talks about what our lives are as our testimony. God, I rebuke the guilt and shame that wars against people. God, the thoughts that they have, they're not worthy. Of course, we're not worthy. You died for us. You died to help us through these things, Jesus. And our testimony is the strongest thing we have. God, I pray, just like Paul talks about, he felt like he was the chief of sinners. I know that feeling. I know how many services I sat in, God, just feeling like the worst of the worst of the worst and letting guilt and shame build up and talk to me every day. every night, tossing and turning. I know what that's like to lay in bed and grind my teeth. I know what it's like to be miserable because I was listening to the wrong voice, the guilt and shame. I rebuke that in Jesus' name. I pray freedom. I pray that you would move on the lives of people that are in that moment right now, God, because by your stripes we are healed. God, your will is for us to be healed and have freedom and hope. I thank you for Apostolic Moral Purity, Jesus. I thank you for Daystar Ministries, the tools that you've given my family. God, there's nothing more important than you helping us through this journey, God, and that we would celebrate in the freedom that we have, Jesus. I pray right now that your anointing would go through the screen to people watching and through our phones as we talk to people. I thank you for the ministry that is unfolding, God. I know there is so much hope and so much that you have in store for us, Jesus. If we just take that guilt and shame and turn it into our testimony. All of us have different stories, and they're all unique in their own way, but they all have similarities, Jesus. And I thank you because I know personally, as long as there's breath, there's hope. The devil's not going to have the victory. In Jesus' name, I thank you for victory. I thank you for freedom.
Thank you.
In Jesus' name.
Amen.
Amen. That's fantastic. Thank you for joining us here tonight. That was awesome. And Thomas, you did awesome. First time doing an online.
First time on an interview. I was afraid I'd talk too much, but this is a subject that I tell you in First Timothy, where Paul's talking about that helped me so much, where it says I did these things in ignorance and I was the chief of sinners, but I am to be an example and use my testimony. And just those 4 or 5 verses right there, beginning Timothy, were a big part. There's so many things in the Word of God that just continue to. There's times I do the Bible. Most of the time, is what I do. But what? She said I'm talking too much.
No,
Now.
I did not.
Anyhow, God's good.
You're awesome. I appreciate your passion, as well as who knows who's watching tonight or in the future. You're ministering to somebody, and that anointing is flowing, and this has been great. Out of your belly shall flow rivers of living water, Jesus said, and we got to flow here tonight. I want to thank everybody for joining us here tonight, and just want to say and encourage you to invite a friend, somebody to join you, maybe get with a group of others who may be struggling with pornographic addiction, or even the other addictions that were mentioned here in our interview. And this is just a great opportunity, because there's always hope, as we just heard here tonight, stated so eloquently and passionately. There's always hope, and you're not alone. There's healing, there's restoration, and Paul said, "Ye who are spiritual, restore such an one." And that's our responsibility. We feel God has given us, and that is to bring restoration. So again, we want to thank everybody for joining us tonight. Our next interview is going to be on April the 8th. And so you want to join us for that. Well, Dr. Sherstead, this has been fantastic. And again, I just want to thank you for your burden and your desire to launch Apostolic Moral Purity. And again, tonight's just been wonderful.
Yeah, I agree. I learned something I never knew. Oh, that's pretty neat. And it's so an honor to have both Tom and Lana. Thank you for communicating as you have done. I was thinking towards the end something about both of you, is that you both have parents that love God. And I just gotta believe that had something, there was some value, some benefit to that in their prayers, that were there backing you up. And that doesn't mean that a couple that doesn't have parents that love God is going to be any less impacted, because there's always people in our lives, always, that care, and I'm very thankful for that. Let me remind all of you, thanks for joining us here. Let me remind you of our upcoming Moral Purity Conference, calling it the Vanguard Conference, and that's coming up May 4th and 5th. It's a Thursday evening, and then an all-day Friday until 4 or 5-ish. You can go on our website, apostolicmoralpurity.com. You can find out what the schedule is, the registration. There's a special deal in a hotel there. There is a $20 registration charge for Friday, and that's to help cover the gourmet lunch that we're all going to partake of. I know that you're going to get a whole lot more value than that, but we needed to do something there. So go on. We'd love to have a few hundred of you show up. I think we're limited to about 350. So we've got a little bit of space left, but you certainly want to be a part. We'd love to see you. Several of you have been watching faithfully these events, Never Alone events. We'd love to meet you, love to hear some things that these have been a blessing to you. And you've done it. So I've met several of you at our conferences, general conference, and you've been so kind. I'm going to wrap this up. But once again, we continue to move forward. You are not alone. And you're not going to overcome. If you've got a pornography addiction, if you've got a sexual addiction of any kind, I know we shy away from the word addiction, but if you're involved at any level in any of that area, then we're here to help you and want to be a blessing to your life, to your family, to your church congregation, so that more and more of us can be ready when the trumpet sounds. God bless all of you, and we will see you next time.